I want to tell you a story about landscape. As a kid, I would used to climb in trees, and actually the trees in the garden of my parents, to create a new view on the house of my parents, but also to see our garden in relationship to the gardens around the one of my parents, and also to see our cat actually walking through these gardens, sitting on the lawn, looking back at me, and creating this kind of relationship of distance. As a student, I used to live right next to a modernist housing block, and with my friends, we used to climb on the roof of that housing block. We found a way using the emergency exit, and this was back in a time when cellular phones didn't exist, and so we would always meet on the roof of that housing block. At the end of my career, we had a bar, we had chairs, we had a table, we had the whole installation. We could even spend the night over there. But it's the same kind of feeling, wanting to extract myself from the ground level and trying to create a new view, a new perspective on what was supposed to be reality. Until very recently, I was the guy in the airplane right next to the window, trying to take pictures, trying to not have the glare and the reflection of the little window, and actually trying to frame what was lying underneath there. I was trying to frame the landscape. What is a landscape? It's a very difficult word. The landscape has been invented as a word in the 15th century, and it has been invented to talk about a new genre in painting. So that the word really, from the beginning, was referring to an image much more than to reality. Those paintings, the first paintings, really were invented or were painted in the Low Countries, so where we are right now. And they actually emerged first in a window painted in a bigger painting. In the 15th centuries, all the scenes were always the same. It was the Immaculate Conception. It was the Virgin with the Child. It was a kind of number or a restricted number of religious themes that would be painted over and over again. And the landscape painters found a new kind of freedom when they cut out this window into the interior scene and create a view on something that was lying beyond. Jan van Eyck, for example. What's really interesting is that in this window, they didn't show reality. They showed a kind of idealized view of what reality could look like. This was later on blown up to a different scale where actually foreground and background were virtually inversed by Joachim Pattenier, for example. And this then became the kind of world landscapes painted by Pieter Bruegel. And what's really interesting is that all these painters never went out into the open and tried to draw what they saw, but they were trying to show a kind of interior idea of what a landscape should look like. Even Claude Lorrain, that you may know, when he was painting, he was actually using text of Virgil, and he was painting Aeneas landing with his ships on the shore rather than going outside and painting the reality that he could see. And so for the first 500 years when landscape was invented, nobody was really drawing the existing. Everybody was drawing some kind of imaginary landscape. And it was not until the Impressionists that we could get a first glimpse of painters painting reality. And I will cite Oscar Wilde as well. Oscar Wilde, he talked about Turner, and he said, it's not until Turner painted the mist above the Thames that we actually could see that mist. He says the mist, of course, was a natural phenomenon. It existed for years and years and years, but nobody really saw it until a painter showed it to us. And this is very interesting. This is actually key to landscape, is that you need an artistic intervention for a land to become a landscape. You need somebody to show you how to look at the land for it to become a landscape being an image, being something that you can recognize. And think about it. It's really Van Gogh who showed us the colors of Arles, the Camargue and Les Alpes. It's Cézanne who showed us Aix-en-Provence. It's Hiroshige who shows us Mount Fuji. You can even go further, and it's in movies, for example, by David Lynch, Twin Peaks, the landscape becomes its own character. When he says the wind is blowing through the sycamore trees, these sycamore trees are not just some kind of decoration, but they become a character on their own. And so you need this artistic intervention for a land to become a landscape. Me, I'm a landscape architect. I'm not a landscape artist. I don't make paintings, I make drawings, and those drawings serve to create a new reality. where landscape paintings would try to reveal an unseen reality. We try to see that unseen reality, but then also make it on the terrain. And so there's this clear double step where we would investigate a territory, try to reveal its essentials, its essential elements, and try to reinforce that to make an exemplary landscape. Flanders has been the perfect laboratory to do this. I came back 7 years ago after having spent 8 years abroad, and I started my office with a clear idea to make strategies for this land without a landscape. And so what we've been doing is really a kind of very thorough reading of all the existing elements of the land. We would actually use maps, a bit in the tradition of Mercator. We would redraw maps. We would redraw all the built infrastructure, all the waterways, all the trees, all the streets, all the parcels. And we would actually abstract this information in different layers, and then combine those layers to look for a new kind of alliance, a new kind of relationship that could mean something for the landscape. And it's hard to explain, but it's a bit like jazz music in a way. If you're not used to listen to it and you would listen to a complicated song, it seems like noise. It's the same with landscape. When you look at it like this, there's nothing to see because you see all the elements at the same time. So you really need to read it almost score by score, the bass line, the drums, the solo, and understand how these different scores or themes work with another, into another, and create this result that we see today. So in our practice, the first thing we do is we do a reading, and we try to make an image that transforms land into landscape and shows the possibility of a landscape. It shows kind of the vocation of what a territory could become. But then we use that image to actually transform reality, because in the end, my clients ask me to make a project, not just to make an image, but to make a project. And this is really interesting, because you come to a kind of situation where there is reality, perception of reality, the perception becomes an image, and that image is used to make a new reality, producing a new image. And so you come into a kind of cycle that's not unlike the cycle of the seasons. It's not unlike the cycle of birth and death. And you come into this kind of cycle of reality, perception, and at some point you understand that there is no more reality. It's all perception. And when it's all perception, reality becomes much less stable. Suddenly the whole ground seems to shift, and you don't really know where you are. And that's exactly the point where I think we need to go to make new reality. And it's a bit linked to this idea that everything we see, the world we live in, has been conceived and constructed. Everything you see right now, from this theater to your chair to the clothes we're wearing, has been conceived by somebody and constructed subsequently, which means that everything could have been different. The reality you see right now is really a kind of mere addition of all those decisions that have been taken. And if you really try to think about that, you understand that so much more is possible. You can almost hack into reality, see it as a layered combination of realities, and see how, with a kind of acupunctural way, you can do a minimal intervention for a maximal change. And so the last 6 years, we have been trying to do that in a number of projects in Belgium, and since a couple of years, more and more also abroad. So I told you I started with climbing in trees, climbing on rooftops, and my fascination for aerial pictures taken from the airplane. I told you this because perception is really key. And I'm not taking those aerial pictures anymore. I changed perspective. And I found a new perspective that changes rapidly. Thank you so much.